I'm going to ask now for Karen to read out the notice and the summons of meeting.
Good afternoon.
Members, will you call the meeting to order, please?
Thank you, Chair. That's okay. Thank you, Chair. To all members of the Environment and Regeneration Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the Environment and Regeneration Committee, which will be a hybrid meeting to be conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the chamber at Guildhall on Wednesday, the 13th of September at 4 p.m. And I'll take the attendance. Alderman Derek Hussey. Alderman Keith Kerrigan. Alderman Julie Middleton.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Barr. Councillor Raymond Barr. Here. Councillor John Boyle. Thank you. Councillor Kathleen Deany, sorry.
And Shaw.
Councillor Alex Duffy.
Shaw.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Hart.
And Shaw.
Councillor Emma McGinley.
And Shaw, Karen.
Councillor Rory McHugh.
Shaw.
Councillor Patrick Murphy.
Shaw.
Thank you. Councillor Declan Norris. Is here. And Councillor Martin Riley, I see is online. Okay, thank you. Chair will do the broadcast announcement, and I'd like to remind everyone present at the meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that the meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol, and due to your attendance at the meeting, you're consenting to be filmed and to the use of the images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purposes of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. And a copy of the Council's privacy notice is found on the Council's website. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Karen. Members, we'll move then to item 3, which is declarations of members' interest. Anybody, any declarations?
Here, there's a wee item in confidential. I'm just on the Northwest Regional Waste Management Group, so just to declare that.
Okay. Councillor McGinley is a member of the Northwest Regional Waste Management Group. And Councillor Duffy, Alex Duffy. Okay, also a member of the Northwest Regional Waste Management Group. Okay then, members, if there's any other declarations come up during the course of the meeting, you can put them under the chat box or declare them as we go. Item 4 then, members, is our presentations today, and I'm going to take both presentations one after each other because obviously they both relate to each other. So I'd just like to remind members as well that it should be noted that there can be no discussion of the criminal case. NIEA will not be discussing any aspect of the criminal case or petition of concern or sentencing, and that the parameters of the presentation will be the latest update on the remediation of the site. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, our first presentation is from the NIEA, and the main presenter is going to be Claire O'Neill. And her colleagues are Jonathan Gray, the project sponsor, Richard Crowe, Director of Resource Efficiency Division, and Mark Cherry, Head of Regulation Unit. And they will also be there to take any questions that pertain to their roles. And we have online as well Alison McMullen, who will be presenting from NI Water. So I'll pass over now to Claire O'Neill. Go ahead, Claire.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to the members as well for giving us the opportunity to come here today to present to you an update on the Maboy remediation project. And thanks for the introductions for myself and colleagues from NIA. there's the massive amount of work has been done. So what I'm going to give you is an overview and the next steps in relation to the project. So we've 15 minutes and 15 slides. Now, some of the slides within the pack are within the pack for information, and I'll not go through each one in detail. Some of you, we've met through the stakeholder meetings that we've had, and some of you haven't. So we're continuing with those stakeholder engagement meetings. So hopefully we can meet some more of you through that as well. Chair, as mentioned there, just in terms of the criminal trial, and I apologise in advance, but if you bear with me, I've just something I need to read out in terms of what we've been advised by our lawyer. So it's now that some of the defendants have pleaded guilty to Article 4 of the Waste to Contaminated Land Order 1997 offences, the court will move to consider sentencing and the associated proceeds of crime application. Some of the facts relevant to the sentencing remain in dispute. The prosecution therefore remains active per the Contempt of Court Act 1981, and the NIA will not be in a position to comment any further. So thank you. Next slide. Sorry, that's the outline really of what we're here to do. So the present us the next one, please. Okay. So what we have is, we have a strategic vision for the Maboy remediation, and that is around minimising the impact and maximising the value. And that's so both our environment and our community can thrive. So in order for us to reach that vision, it centres around aims of collaborative working together. And very much, pinning on that is about, this project is about the remediation, and it's about looking forward and not looking back. It's also centres around ensuring that none of our actions have any impact on the criminal case, and I think I've covered that just in the intro there. But the site remediation, doing nothing is not an option, and we're very much about this partnership and collaborative working, which we want to continue through this forum and also through our stakeholder engagement. With the ultimate aim of the delivery of an agreed site vision and the creation of a community asset. So, next slide. So this slide, I'm not going to read through it. You'll all be glad to hear it. It really underpins and outlines the legislative basis of which we're moving forward, and that's included in the pack. And it's just covering under the water order and the environmental liability regulations. So next slide. So the Maboy remediation project is led by and established by NIEA, and it's to provide a strategic direction for the implementation of the Maboy remediation. We have a project board which is chaired by our NIEA director, and we also then have board members which provide independent advice on their respective business areas. For example, we have Northern Water on the board from the drinking water perspective. We have DFI planning roads and rivers from their perspectives. And we also have the council. The key role once remediation works are complete is around on the site vision and the aspiration for the council to have a potential role in the future use of the site. We also have a member of the board, which is a director from Kildare County Council. And I'm not sure if members are aware, or some are aware of the project in County Kildare, which was based around a lot of similarities to Maboy, a large illegal dump, which has gone through a similar process to what we're embarking on in terms of the risk and then looking at what the strategy for development that project has gone through that process, and they're actually completed the remediation and are actually realising the site vision aspect. And their site vision for a public park is due to open now very shortly. So I know we had an opportunity to bring elected members and some members of the community to Kildare last year, and that was really useful. At that time, the project, they were in the middle of the remediation work, so it was a real opportune time. And I think the members that attended found it useful to really get a feel of what was what learning we can have gained from that. We certainly have had a lot of learning through that role in the project board and the liaison with them. So, next slide. Stakeholder engagement is a vital and an integral part of the project. We focused on developing a strategy for the site, and through that we have had a number of, I think, over 9 stakeholder engagement meetings with elected members and community representatives. And through those meetings, we've worked through the process that we've been embarking on through those steps. All of the presentations from those stakeholder engagement meetings are all available on our website. And then in parallel with that, just earlier this year, we also have had engagement meetings on the site vision aspect of the project. And I'll touch a wee bit more just on the site vision maybe later in the presentation. But the picture there on the screen was the output from an engagement meeting we had with the young people from Ina Youth Forum in the Eglinton Centre. So it was really what's shown there is that the young people's all the ideas that they had for looking to the future post remediation. So within those groups, we met with youth groups, we met with schools, educators, Section 75 groups, council officers and elected members. So we will be building on that as well, just to highlight just that important piece of getting that engagement right through the whole project. So next slide. So this slide, moving on to talking more about the Pacific project work. So there are 3 key objectives. Protection of public health is of ultimate importance. Protection of the environment is also, and to deliver those 2 objectives, the objective of delivering the remediation for the site is vital. So then working in complementary to those in terms of the project and the remediation works, the objectives for the works, for the remediation of the site, is for the protection of the River Faughan water quality, the protection of Northern Ireland water drinking water supply, the improvement of the groundwater quality, the reduction of landfill gas to acceptable levels to protect site users, and then also the wider integration with other public interests, for example, the A6 road scheme. Next slide. So for us to deliver the remediation, we are following, it's a UK best practice guidance, and it's called the Land Contamination and Risk Management. Or better known as LCRM, and I'll maybe refer to it as LCRM because that is quite a mouthful. But the LCRM is a technical framework in assessing and managing risk from contaminated land. So it's a risk-based approach, and it's broken down into 3 stages. On the slide there, I've outlined the 3 stages. So I'll not read through each line on that, but you can see there in terms of the progress of the project, we have completed stage 1 of that process and stage 2, and we're now in stage 3. Stage 3, where we are in the project now, is the development of the remediation strategy. And we have now developed a draft remediation strategy, and that will be subject to public consultation, which we envisage to launching very shortly. We've gone through that process, as I've outlined before, through the stakeholders and through engagement of that process, looking at those aspects of where we have got to in the LCRM process. The LCRM, it's probably important to note as well, LCRM is statutory guidance. It's published on the Environment Agency website, and it applies to England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So it's used across as a technical framework across those 3 jurisdictions. So next slide. So this slide provides more detail really on those work stages that I've described that we have completed on stage 1 and stage 2 of LCRM. So stage one, you can see there just on the cone, it's kind of, we started off at the top of the cone working down towards what is a key point in the project. So we're starting off with site investigations. There has been extensive site investigation across the whole of Maboy site. And the most recent ones were completed in May 22. And the reason that there was additional extensive site investigations at that point is that there was areas of the site that hadn't been previously investigated to the level of detail that was required. And that included the lakes on the site, and also there was some additional areas that were really difficult to reach. So you'll see there on the bottom right-hand side where we have a barge. We had a barge that went out onto those lakes and boreholes drilled, and that was to check if there was any waste under the lakes. And it was to ensure that we have as much information as is possible about the site. And it's really important that we had as much information as possible, because that is then the information that we utilise to inform the detailed, what we call, it's quite a mouthful as well, it's a detailed quantitative risk assessment. And the more information and the more site information we have, the better informed that risk assessment is. And then moving on from that, once we have understood the risk, we then move on to the next step where we can assess the site in terms of what is the best option for remediation. Now, we're all aware it's a large site, it's a complex site. So to do that, we had broken it down into 9 zones plus the city industrial waste yard. So there's ultimately 10 zones to assess across that. So for each of those zones, we then looked at, they were defined by looking at the types of waste within the zone and also the contaminants within those zones. And then looking at that zone, it was then looking at what we call, it was called a multi-criteria analysis. It is a complex process. It's a process that we'd actually ran a number of workshops with the stakeholders, taking through the steps of it. And it is an area that, if members would like, we would be more than happy to run an additional workshop to get into the detail of that, because it's quite difficult in this forum to get into that detail. So I'm trying to give an overview of giving a flavour of that, but we'd welcome the opportunity to go through that in detail if members would like that. So looking at each zone, we then had scoring of different options for remediation, things like leachate treatment, a different biological capping, some waste removal, permeable reactive barriers. There was a huge number of options assessed across each zone. So we really had hundreds of scoring to come up with what was the best option through that appraisal process. So that has been completed, and we've, as I've alluded or said previously, we now have a recommended draft optimum remediation strategy that we intend to envisage taking forward for consultation shortly. Okay, next slide. So the next slide is outlining our next step, or where we are in our next step. So we appointed I apologise for the acronym. It's called ICT, stands for Integrated Consultancy Team. So we have an appointed consultancy team in June, and the decision to appoint that was taken by Minister. We're now at the optimum remediation strategy for consultation, consideration of responses, and then moving forward to an approval process for the adoption of that. We then will move the implementation. There's a business case, which is well advanced, and that will be submitted to DOF for the Department of Finance for approval. And then we're looking at affordability. And affordability is a decision that will need to be taken on all government and public funded projects. We'll need to consider affordability. And then the procurement of a contractor to deliver the works. Okay. Next slide. So next slide is really to cover and update members. I think you'll all be aware through updates that we have issued through the monthly update to members, and also with the stakeholders on the the update on the estimate of the amount of waste on the site. There's a lot of detail on that slide. Again, that's in the pack. I'm going to read through the detail, but the really important thing to note on that is you see on the left-hand side of the slide we have a picture with the green dots, and those green dots depict the monitoring locations that the original estimate was based on. So as I've gone through in terms of the additional site investigations, of which they have been extensive, we have a huge amount of additional data. And because of that, with that additional data and with the use of modelling software, we have updated the estimate of the waste on the site. And it is really, really important to note that it's not a change in the amount of waste on the site. There has been no change in terms of the waste on the site. It is an update of the estimate given the information that we've been able to glean from the site investigations. So, next slide. So next slide is really, I want to highlight the alignment and integration with other schemes. You'll see this on the slide there. The tan area shows the floodplain relevant to the Maboy site. And it's to highlight that we're designing the remediation, taking climate change into account and considering and ensuring that the remediation design will be resilient to future flooding. So it's very much part of the whole project and design. The pink area, shaded area, is the planned route of the A6 road scheme. So we work closely with DFI colleagues, and that's to ensure that both projects align. And we're looking at a design that we're integrating the design and making sure that they both align. And then the green area is, it's an area of special area of conservation, which runs along the Maboy site along the River Faughan. And that area is something that's very much a consideration in the project. But we really see that as an opportunity through the remediation, and then looking through site vision as to how we can utilise and complement the area that we have available to us there. And what really came through, I think what was a key message, it's probably worth highlighting here, is in our engagement on site vision, it was a real strong message coming through about, nature-based ideas. So that I think that's really where that opportunity comes in as well in terms of the special area of conservation. Next slide. So a question we get asked, you've heard me mention site vision there a number of times, and I think an obvious question is, why do we talk about site vision now? Post when it is post remediation, and I think it's important to just explain why we do talk about site vision now. So remediation to protect public health and the environment is always the primary priority. But remediation requirements, so the requirements of remediation, for example, the ground conditions, the slopes, levels, the infrastructure that we require, the drainage, they're all requirements of remediation. But site vision desirables will inform remediation plans, such as site roads and paths, car park locations. So if we're starting to think about what we want the site to ultimately be in terms of community asset, we're thinking about the things that are desirable, and then seeing how they can be incorporated into the requirements. Remediation obviously has to happen first, but the best outcome is for both of those to be planned in parallel. So that's why we are looking at site vision at this point. So next slide. So one of the key risks with the Maboy site is the risk to public drinking water supply. And we're very much aware of that. And there is an extensive multi-layered monitoring programme in place across the site. We work closely with Northern Ireland Water on that monitoring. And it centres around ensuring that there's no impact from the Maboy site to the River Faughan and monitoring that. To date, there have been no impacts detected from the Maboy site to the water quality in the River Faughan. But there's no room for complacency on that. There's a 24/7 testing of the raw water extraction at the extraction point and that test for ammonia as one of the things, and ammonia is a proxy chemical. Northern Water have that set up that if that is detected, there are measures in place where the works can be shut down and drinking water is taken from other treatment works such as Balnareece and Cahill. So that has not been needed as a result from anything that has been attributable to the Maboy site. Also with that, which is a really key one, there is a daily screening of the raw water before it goes to the water treatment works, and also of the final water from the treatment works. And that daily screening looks at thousands of chemicals and to check that there's any indication for any presence of anything that needs to be tested for further. And there's been a question asked a number of times, how do we know what to test for, or how are we testing for the right things? And I think it's important to note that screening is based on a lot of analysis of the surface waters coming from the site, and also of the groundwater, or the water under the site, which we know is contaminated. And it's looking at those contaminants that are in that groundwater and ensuring that they are being tested for in the river. So that's a really key measure in terms of being able to provide assurances around the safety of the drinking water. We also have an extensive monitoring program looking at the upstream of monitoring of the River Faughan and downstream, and that's looking at the differential to ensure that there's no impact from the Maboy site. And those are all things that are testing based on testing in the river. But underpinning that, within the site, which is shown on the screen there in the oval, and then to the right-hand side, I know that you can't read it, but it's really to demonstrate all of those points on that smaller picture to the right are demonstrating borehole locations across the site that we monitor on a regular basis. They range from bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly and annual suites, depending on what different chemicals. And those are monitored. We now have over 7 years of monitoring, and the reason for that is to ensure that we're looking for any trends or changes in risks or anything that can give us any indication to anything changing, so that we need to take action. So that's an ongoing piece of work that will continue, that is continuing, and that is with Northern Ireland Water. So from those trends, so any indications of any change in the risk, that we have actions that we can take, and we have emergency response plans in place. So it's all based around the extensive monitoring plan that is ongoing. I think that takes me to the end of the presentation. So thank you for listening, and I hope I didn't go over time. Maybe I did.
Oh, you're not too bad. Thank you very much, Claire, for that. Members, as I said at the start of the meeting, I'm going to now take the presentation from Alison McMullen from NI Water, and then we'll take questions from members then following that. So is Alison with us? Can you hear us and see us all right, Alison?
I can, yes. Can you hear and see me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear. Go ahead,
Okay.
Alison.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank you for the invitation and opportunity to present to the Environment and Regeneration Committee today on Carmody Works and the drinking water quality. And it was great to be able to host a visit to Carmody on Friday, the 8th of September, for some of the members, and I hope that they found the visit useful and informative, and had the opportunity to ask some questions related to the treatment and the drinking water quality monitoring and testing that we undertake. And we'd be very happy to extend that visit opportunity to other members if they would be interested in that. We can do that at any time. And I would just like to note, sort of before I start the presentation as well, is that Carmody Water Treatment Works is a critical national infrastructure site, and therefore there's certain security requirements for the site and some of the visuals that's difficult for me to share in the public domain because of that. But everything with this in the presentation here is fine. Okay, so I want to just move on to the next slide, please. So I'll just give you the introduction there. I'll go through Carmody Works treatment catchment, and then the treatment process, some of our contingency planning, talk a wee bit about drinking water safety plans and how we manage drinking water quality. And then I'll go through some drinking water quality monitoring, just go through some parameters that we test for, and just show you some graphs of some of the data that there is there as well. The next slide then, please. So Carmody drinking water catchment area, it's a large catchment area. It extends to approximately 268 kilometres. It's identified as a drinking water protected area under Article 7 of the Water Framework Directive. So that means there's certain requirements that water within that has to be protected, and that there's certain requirements to sort of for monitoring under the Water Framework Directive as well. It's within the Falcon Local Management Area of the Lower Foyle Catchment and in the Northwestern International River Basin District. As you can see sort of from the map that's there, it is a large extensive catchment, and it covers quite a range of different sort of uses within the catchment. So extensive areas of agriculture, there's peatland within it, also covers urban areas with areas of industry as well, and forestry. So all of those sort of catchment uses, catchment types, bring with them certain issues, certain difficulties in relation to the raw water that would be supplied to the water treatment works. And that's sort of I suppose, there's the issues and inputs from all of those various uses within the catchment. If you just go on to the next slide then, please. So we abstract water into Carmody Water Treatment Works from the River Fawton, and it's a direct river abstraction. The raw water is abstracted at approximately 2 miles downstream of the landfill site, and we on a daily basis abstract an average of 20 megalitres per day into the treatment works. It's a very flashy river source, and that means it can change very quickly depending on the amount of rainfall events, and that can sort of impact on the quality of the water there. And I think the members had an opportunity to see the differences of the raw water that we can receive at times into the works. We sort of saw that on the day that the quality was quite good, but we also saw an example of a sample where it was quite discoloured, a lot of sediments within it, and that can change so quickly, on by 10 minutes time after a heavy rainfall event, that can change the quality of the water. But we do have measures in place to protect the water treatment works as well. And I know that Claire made reference to this in her presentation as well too, that we do and automatically shut down the raw water abstraction on alarm levels. And the alarms are in place for 24/7 monitoring. And those are on ammonia and oil and water. So ammonia would be a very volatile, sort of mobile substance. And we set that at a very small trigger level, and so that we protect works. Works needs to be protected from the risk of ammonia coming in, because it can impact on the treatment process there as well. And then the oil and water monitor, it would detect if there was any hydrocarbons in the water, and that again we would shut the works down to protect it from that coming into the works. If you just move on to the next slide, please. So Carmody Water Treatment Works itself, it's designed for an output of 55 megalitres per day, and as I noted on with our abstraction, we generally abstract around 20 megalitres per day, so our average output would range on the 18 to 20 megalitres per day. So we're under half of what the works is designed to treat. Our drinking water supply to homes, businesses, schools and hospitals, and there's approximately 23,000 homes, residential homes, and 3,000 non-residential homes that would be supplied from Carmody Water Treatment Works. It's a multi-barrier treatment process, and this is just a bit of a diagram that sort of describes the different treatment processes we have in place at Carmody. So The water's abstracted into the treatment works. It undergoes what's called coagulation. So that's where we add chemical to the water to try to bring the dirt within the water together into what we call a floc, which is just larger particles. And it pulls all those together, and then we in our flocculation tank. And once we've sort of flocculated the water and pulled all those sort of bits of sediment together, they move across into our next stage of treatment, which is called dissolved air flotation. And that's where we inject air saturated water into the bottom of the tank, and that pushes all the sediments up to the top, which we then take off, and then the treated water from that flows forward into our stages of filtration. So we have primary filtration, which would be the hardest working part of the treatment process, where we're filtering out any residual sediments. And then we have secondary filtration, which is granular activated carbon, and it's there to remove sort of organics. It deals with pesticides. It also deals with the likes of taste and odors and things like that as well. So, and then it will go forward and then into tertiary filtration stage, which is removal of iron and manganese. So we would change the pH of the water there slightly to precipitate those out. Those will be filtered out, and then it'll go forward through for disinfection and into supply. So throughout that whole process, there's from the raw water right through to the final water product. Each stage of the treatment has online water quality monitors with alarm settings. And again, those are monitoring 24/7, and the works will shut down if those alarms are triggered at any point through the treatment process. And that's really so that we protect the drinking water quality that's going into supply. And the alarms are set at a proactive level as well, so they're well below any regulatory limits, so that we ensure that we protect proactive actions taken before there's risk to drinking water quality leaving the site. So just the next slide then, please. So this is just a bit of a visual just to show you. I talked about the area that Carmody supplied and the number of properties there. So that's just a bit of a visual of the area that we supplied from Carmody Water Treatment Works. And then once the water leaves Carmody Water Treatment Works, it goes into what we call service reservoirs, and those hold water within the system in storage tanks, so that we have maintain a supply to customers at all times. Carmody itself has approximately 2 days of storage on site, so we could shut down Carmody, as we talked about on any of those alarms, and we'd have 2 days storage on site to maintain supply to customers. But in addition to that 2 days storage we have on site, we have storage within the system as well at those service reservoirs. So that enables us to maintain supply to customers for those short term out of supply from the treatment works when it shuts down at any time. So we'll just go on to the next slide then, please. So that just sort of moves into sort of our contingency planning, and I suppose we've talked about how we maintain supply to customers, both at storage at the water treatment works and within the network at our service reservoirs. But we also have contingency plans in place for all of our water treatment works, and there would be one for Carmody as well. And that provides us with a framework of how we deal with and limit the impact of a total loss of supply from a water treatment works and maintain supply to customers. So for Carmody, we have interconnectivity to 2 other water treatment works, and we can bring water into the Carmody supply area from Ballinreese Water Treatment Works, which is in sort of Coleraine area, and Caw Hill Water Treatment Works, which would be in Dungiven area, and we can bring water in, and that would enable us to take Carmody out of supply completely and bring the water in from those two works. And that was sort of a medium-term to long-term solution there to maintain supply to the Carmody supply area if Carmody Water Treatment Works wasn't able to be used. In addition to that, we also upgraded our abstraction point to build in additional flood resilience, and that links back to the flood that happened in 2007, where abstraction point was completely flooded. We lost supply to the works because the whole thing was underwater, and it took us quite a significant time to get that back up and running. So we've upgraded that to provide resilience there to ensure that that wouldn't happen again in the future with a 7 level of flooding. So just the next slide then. So this is, I suppose, a bit of an overview on how we sort of manage drinking water quality through a source to tap approach. And this links to World Health Organization guidelines in relation to safety planning for water supply. So I suppose the overarching for Northern Ireland Water is that there's drinking water regulations in place. And those are, our regulator is the Drinking Water Inspectorate. So the drinking water safety plans sort of cover that whole portion from source right through to the customer tap, with the aim of supplying safe, quality drinking water to our customers. So as we've talked about, the raw water abstraction has alarms on it 24/7, which will enable shutdown. We undertake daily sampling and analysis of our raw water, and then treatment plant we talked about, we have alarms 24/7 monitoring on those with immediate shutdown if any of those alarms are triggered. But again, we do daily sampling and analysis of our treated water as well. And then when water goes into our distribution system, we take samples at our service reservoirs and our customer taps to monitor the quality of water that our customers are receiving as well. And just the next slide then, please. So, and then this is just a wee piece about sort of our drinking water quality monitoring assessment. So we just want to move on to the next slide then as well, please. So we did talk about that, the raw water quality is monitored continuously at the raw water abstraction point and at the inlet to the water treatment works. And their abstraction will automatically shut down on alarm level for ammonia and oil and water. And then from the raw water to the final treated water product, each treatment stage has an online water quality monitors with alarm settings in place. We take samples of the raw water and the final water daily for analytical testing to monitor water quality. Samples are taken to our laboratories, both in Belfast and in Derry, for testing. We also have on-site testing. We have a small lab at the site where the operational guys on the site there, they would take checks through just to make sure that the treatment is meeting requirements and also that it's in line with the water quality online monitoring as well. And then we take samples daily at our customer taps to monitor the quality of the water. And I know that Claire also made reference there that we also take samples daily of our raw and final waters for a scan. And that sort of covers all the parameters that potentially could be there. And we're looking for trends on that. And if any of those trends on that, which is a qualitative analysis, if anything was noting that required further investigation, we would then undertake quantitative analysis for those as well. I just want to move on to the next slide then as well. So we would analyze over 150 individual parameters routinely on our raw and final water samples, and that's excluding other things that we do less frequently, and it's also excluding the scan that I talked about there as well. So those samples and the results of those are assessed against the requirement of the drinking water regulations. And if there isn't a regulator's limit specified in the drinking water regulations, or if it's a parameter that's not within the drinking water regulations but that we test for, we would assess that against the public health risk assessment of the World Health Organization guidelines or other sort of health-based targets as well. So there's suggested no adverse reaction levels or snarls as well for parameters, and we would assess our data against those to make sure that there's no risk or there's no breach against those as well. So if I want to just move on to the next slide. So I've just got a series of slides here which shows some of the water quality monitoring that we have in place. It can't cover everything, but I've taken sort of a snapshot across different types of parameters just to show you what we do and how we assess that against the drinking water standards here. So the first one is bacteriological parameter E. coli. You can see there that the red is the raw water. So you can see that we can get some very high levels of E. coli in the raw water. So you can see results there of over 40,000. But if you look then along the bottom, it might just look like it's at 0, but that is our final water. And that's showing that we are not detecting any E. coli on our final treated water. And those are results. I've just given a sort of about a 5-year span of results there just to see, and you can see that the regulatory limit would be with no, you can't have anything. So any breach of that, one E. coli in the treated drinking water supply would be a failure of the regulatory standard. We'll just go on to the next slide then. So this is aluminium. And again, you can see the black line there is the in the raw water. And again, we can get some very high levels of aluminium in the raw water. And that's natural. You know, we would see this at other sites as well. So this isn't specific to Carmody, but it's a reflection again, I suppose, of that flashy river source where you can get some elevated levels due to the nature of the changes of the raw water during rain and after rainfall events. And then the sort of the turquoisey line there within that, that's the final water. Again, you can see how the treatment works is reduced risk for aluminium in the water. I've given some sort of regulatory there just in the little table, which shows your regulatory limit for aluminium in drinking water is 200 micrograms per litre, and we've been well below that. There's a health limit of 500, and then the snarls as well there, but are set up. So you have 9 micrograms per litre and 7-day snarl and 24-hour snarl of 2,100 micrograms per litre. And if I just move on to the next slide. So this is turbidity, and again, this is again you can see the reflective, similar to iron, where you can, or aluminium, where you can see the risk in the raw water. Again, it can be very turbid water, so you get some very elevated levels of turbidity. But when you look at the sort of turquoise line there for the final water, you can see it's all very low. So the regulatory limit there would be what's called NTU, and samples have been below that regulatory limit of 1 NTU. And again, sort of we would report anything that was greater than 1 in the final water for Carmody water for any water treatment works to the drinking water inspectorate if there was a breach of that standard. And then just the next slide. This is just one for iron as well. You can see it can be quite high levels in the raw water, but the treatment works well to remove that. We have the treatment processes there for iron removal along with manganese removal. The regulatory limit again for iron in drinking water would be 200. So we're well below that in relation to what we're seeing in the treated water. And just the next slide then. Again, this is colour. You can see sort of the variation in colour linking through to those changes in raw water quality. Treated drinking water quality is well below the regulatory standard, which would be 20 in the final water. Just the next slide then. So this is just some of the parameters that I know some people have sort of queried in relation to sort of risk in the drinking water. So sorry, the next slide there, please. Which is arsenic. So there is sorry, there's one up maybe, is it? Arsenic, yeah. So yes, you can find arsenic in drinking water, but it's well below the regulatory limit, and it's generally would be naturally occurring. So there's no risk there in level of arsenic that we're seeing in the drink, and it's well below the regulatory limit of 10 micrograms per litre. You can see there just the scale on the side there as well, as just to put it into context, the scale is going up to 5 micrograms per litre. So you can see that we're well below 1 microgram per litre in the treated drinking water that's going into supply. And those, the yellow line there is actually what we're measuring at customer taps. So that's what customers are getting in their drinking water supply. So just the next slide then. And this is another one that I know has been queried in the past as well, which I included it as cadmium, another one of the heavy metals too. Again, just to note, the scale on the side is going up to 0.3 micrograms per litre. The regulatory limit is 5 micrograms per litre. So you can see we're well below that in the treated drinking water that's going into supply. And again, these are samples that are measured at the customer tap too. So you can see there, the maximum we got there was just over 0.1 micrograms per litre against a regulatory limit of 5 micrograms per litre. So again, well below any regulatory limits for cadmium. And just the next slide then. And chromium, again, another one that I know had been queried in the past. Again, just to point, the scale on the left-hand side is going up to around 4 micrograms per litre. The regulatory limit is 10 micrograms per litre. And you can see there that sort of our maximum that we've seen is just under 1.5. So that's well below the drinking water regulatory limit for chromium in drinking water. And again, those are samples that are lifted at the customer tap too. So that's what the customers are getting out of their tap. Next slide then, please. So this is benzene, one of the sort of the hydrocarbons as well. Again, I'll just note the scale there is going up to 0.08 micrograms per litre. The regulatory limit for benzene in drinking water is 1 microgram per litre. And the red line is the raw water. So you can see some variations in the raw water, and that would be expected. And then the black line is what we're measuring in the final water. And there is a turquoise line on that, which is what's measured at customer taps as well too. So some of those sort of merge into each other a wee bit there too. But just to note that the maximum we're seeing there in the treated water going into supply, 0.04 micrograms per litre against a regulatory limit of 1 microgram per litre. So it's well below any regulatory limit there as well. Naphthalene, the next slide there too. Naphthalene I know has been sort of linked to sort of hydrocarbons and tarry waste sites and things like that within the area too. So I've included that one. There is no regulatory limit for naphthalene, but there are some snarls set for that of a 7-day snarl of 120 micrograms per litre and a 24-hour snarl of 300 micrograms per litre. Again, just to note the scale on the side there is going up to just over 3 micrograms per litre. And the red line is in the raw water, and the black line is the treated drinking water going into supply from Carmody Water Treatment Works. So well below any levels of concern in relation to naphthalene there as well. And you can see it generally just tots along the bottom there of very low levels. And just the next slide then. Benzoyl-pyrene, this is one of the hydrocarbon parameters that we would monitor for, and it has a very low regulatory limit, one of the lowest ones we have in relation to any of the hydrocarbon parameters, which is why I've included it. And the regulatory limit for it is 0.01 micrograms per litre. And you can see there again, just to note the scale on the left-hand side is just about 0.015 micrograms per litre. So again, you can see we're well below the regulatory limit there, both in relation to the treated drinking water and also in the raw water as well too. And the next slide then, please. Again, another one for hydrocarbons, and this is pH for some of 4 substances. So these are within the regulations of the 4 hydrocarbon parameters that we need to monitor for, and it's just a sum of the total of those 4 parameters. The regulatory limit is 0.1 micrograms per litre. And you can just, again, the scale on the left-hand side goes up to a maximum of 0.04. So again, you can see we're well below any regulatory limits, both in the treated and in the raw water there. So maximum in the raw water was just about half of the regulatory limit. And the next slide then, please. So I've just included a couple of the sort of PFAS parameters. These are parameters that are of emerging concern, and I know sort of get some sort of members of the public would be interested on these as well. They're not currently within the regulations, but they are included in the recast directive, which hasn't been transposed into regulations in Northern Ireland for new drinking water regulations. But we have been monitoring these for a period of time now, just to build up a data set to see what's there. So there is no PCV regulatory limit for these because it's not in drinking water regulations, but there are some WHO values And there are also SNAR levels there as well, which I've included. Now, just to note that these results are reported in nanograms per litre, and the scale again on the left-hand side goes up to about 1.5 nanograms per litre. So all our results are low. The red is the raw water, where we've been monitoring the raw water for a number of years. And then last year we undertook some sampling, both of the raw water and the final water. So you can see there in the final water, 0.8 nanograms per litre. So very low level of PFOA, which was detected in that, and that's well below. As you can see, like the WHO is 100 nanograms per litre, and we were detecting 0.8 nanograms per litre in the treated water supply there. I've just included another one of the PFAS products, which was PFOA, and it's, again, you can see these results are reported in nanograms per litre. So again, similar to the last one there, maximum that we've seen to date in the raw water is about 1.3, 1.5 nanograms per litre, against sort of what a WHO, World Health Organization guideline value of 100 nanograms per litre. So again, we're well below that. And again, we monitored last year in our treated drinking water supply as well, and the result was 0.08 nanograms per litre. And we're doing further sampling. The results aren't available, but in 2020 we're sampling again at the raw and final water for a number of PFAS products. This is just two, which I've given as an indication of some of the ones that we've been testing for. And then I think that's possibly the end of the slides, is it? So thank you, that's me. Oh,
Okay,
sorry, it's just one. Sorry, I had just included one wee sort of online monitoring trend, which is the raw water, which I've described there. So this is just, this is our online monitoring that we do for our raw water. And it just shows you there the limit, which is set at which the works will shut down. So you can see there, this is just data for this year to present. We haven't seen any instances where it's breached our set point alarm, and so the works hasn't shut down this year on ammonia. Sorry, I forgot there was one more slide. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Members, you've heard both presentations there, and as I said at the start of the meeting, we'll now take questions from members. And just to remind members again that in relation to the NIEA presentation, there can't be any discussion on the criminal case or the proceeds of crime or the sentencing. And could also ask members, if you are asking questions, if you could just indicate if your questions are to NIEA and when your question is pertinent to NI Water. So the first person who is indicated is Councillor Alex Duffy.
Madam Chair, and hello again, Claire and Alison. It's nice to see you here. And Council, on behalf of Sinn Féin, you're very welcome here today. And thank you very much for both your presentations. We spoke at Friday at the Carmody site visit about a few things, not a few questions in. I suppose for yourself, Claire, just on the great piece of work that you're doing and your team are doing, is this, are you going to get to a point, because with no functioning government at the minute, due to one party, that is it going to go to a point that you're going to hit a brick wall and then you can't move anymore without a minister in place?
Yeah, through the chair. We, as a team, we're in a process of, as I've outlined, just in terms of getting the remediation strategy, business case, and then we're into affordability. And that's a decision that we're progressing through the what I'm thinking of the horizon that we're in now. It's something that we need to keep working through. And I think it's just something that if we're looking at it from the point of view that we need to be ready with all the process that we need to get in place. And that means pushing forward to get it to that point so that whenever that decision's, that's something that we're going to have to work through, because there will be decisions around affordability, for example, that I've touched on already. So it's a matter of pushing through to that point and seeing what the horizon is like at that point.
Thank you. Just for Alison, the site visit for me was well, it was very interesting and seeing how our drinking water is protected, especially from the environmental disaster that is Maboy, that we're all concerned about. It was interesting to learn that, as you stated, there's been no evidence of any spikes of pollutions from the raw water intake, or even through the other teams' samples that they're taking. There hasn't been no evidence of any spikes, what I suppose is reassuring. But again, this is the now, and in the future, we're not going to know the real extent to the Maboy and what the environmental impact it's going to have until it gets to that point. God forbid that there's some sort of bank burst and more leakage and stuff like that. But it was very reassuring, and I suppose seeing the process and really the in-depth, the whole filtration systems and seeing even the visual samples that he's done was very interesting with the raw intake, and then when it comes to the what's ready for your cup in the house, I suppose, was very helpful, and it sort of helps us then to reassure members of the public, because I know when we were canvassing, it was a big issue on the doors for the people around Faughan, and not only around Faughan, because as stated here today, the drinking water that comes from Carmoney is used right across this city and district. So it is a pressing matter for a lot of people. And as I say, it was reassuring to see how our water is protected. And again, that there has been, at this moment in time, no spikes. But again, we don't know what this is going to, the impact this is really going to have until the future. Thank you.
Yeah. No, well, thank you, Latna. Thank you. You appreciated and enjoyed the visit. You know that you got a lot out of that. That's really good to know, and certainly, I mean, our monitoring continues. We will continue to have monitoring in place to make sure that there is no risk. And we work very closely with NIA as well too. And Claire did talk about that as well. That the data is shared between NIA and ourselves, so that we are aware of anything that they are detecting, and that we can assess that as a potential risk for us coming to us at the water treatment works, and any measures that we would need to take in place. And that process in place, you know, and our water quality data is freely available too. You know, you can download the copy of our data from the website there at any time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duffy. And our next councillor indicated is Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you to both NIEA and NI Water for your informative and thorough presentations. So more than a question, I've just got a comment to make, and we are very thankful for the information, and we know that this issue is way beyond playing politics and is now about facts and about moving to find a remedy. Whilst I know that this meeting is public and the public can view our meetings, I think it would be particularly helpful and reassuring for local residents to hear the information we've heard today regarding how thoroughly the water is tested and how often the water is tested. I'm not saying that you haven't shared that information, but just again and again and again, because certainly some of the elderly residents that I call with don't necessarily tune into online meetings and maybe don't have their finger on their social media. So if we could keep getting that information out, that would be great. And thank you again.
Thanks for that, Julie. And our next councillor is Councillor Hargan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations. And I think it's very important that we're getting these presentations and this accountability, because I think the crisis at Lough Neagh now underscores the problem that we're facing with our water sourcing. So if you add up Lough Neagh and you add Maboy, we have a very, very serious problem with our water provision here in the north. And I know a couple of people have been held to account through the courts for profiteering from the illegal Maboy dump, but nobody in government has been held to account for any of this, and that's a huge problem. And that's true when government was up, and it's true now when government is down. And we know that Maboy happened right under the noses of government, and nothing was done about it. And that's why the inquiry is going to be very, very important. We are continuing to look back because we want to understand why this crisis and why this illegal dump was allowed to happen in the first place. And there needs to be accountability there. And what's happened at Lough Neagh means that that is actually even more important, because the two things that link Maboy and Lough Neagh are profiteering. Illegal profiteering at Maboy and then going for growth has had a massive impact, and that's a government strategy on Lough Neagh. We're not here to talk about Lough Neagh right now, but we are here to talk about Maboy because it's on our doorstep. There are continuing concerns. So I have a couple of questions for both the remediation team and for NI Water. For the remediation team, I mean, I think people will have read today about millions being spent so far on the remediation, but there's been no remediation yet. And I think in a cost of living crisis, people will be wondering what's going on. So the first question I have is, it looks to me in terms of the actual proposal that the remediation is going to be focused on the part of the dump where the road is going to run through, the A6. And I think that there's questions there. Are we prioritising the road over the river? Is that the case? And if we can get clarity on that, isn't it the case that we should be prioritising protecting the river and making sure that leaching is blocked off in the future? And connected to that question is the decision around just focusing on the area where the road is about cost? But then there's a question then. If it costs less now to do that, won't in the long run, couldn't it cost a lot more in the long run if we actually don't address the area, the part of the dump that's right next to the river? And then if there is leaching into the river, we haven't actually dealt with that, and that will set the stage then for more costly remediation down the road. And then if there is going to be a road built on through the dump, will there be an environmental assessment and another public inquiry? Because that's been agreed and it's been called for by former ministers, MLAs. So there's serious questions here about what the next step is for the remediation and if that's what it's going to look like. And then for the NI Water team, I thought that the visit on Friday to the Carmody Wasteworks as well was extremely educational and useful, and it was great to hear directly from the workers there about what they do day in, day out, and they very much are key workers who maybe should be valued more when it comes to their pay and how they're treated. But one question, and there was a lot of questions on Friday, and we did get a lot addressed, is when it comes to emergent toxins or new toxins, how are we testing for them? Because there's a lot of testing being done. It's very, very thorough. But some of the things that we know are in Maboy, for example, plastics or shredded plastics, those things are sometimes not tested for because they're not as prevalent yet in our water systems. So how are we testing for that? And then are we testing life in the river, for example, plant life and fish life, to get an understanding as well of how different toxins are impacting the river. So we could get those addressed, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin, and I'll go to the NIE team first.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, thank you for the questions, and I hope I'll have caught them all here. But so in terms of the plan and the strategy for the site, it's a whole site integrated remediation strategy. There's no prioritization across the strategy for specific areas. So the site as a whole, when we talk through it, and I think that probably feeds back into in terms of, we'd really welcome the opportunity to go through the process in detail, because even though we had the site broken down into zones, that was to make it manageable, because it's such a big site, and looking at what remediation options would be applicable to each zone. But those are all then taken together, which then is this integrated solution for the site. And once we get to the consultation on the optimum remediation strategy, that will become clearer as well. In terms of looking at the roadway and environmental impact assessment and public inquiry, those are questions that are centred around the A6, and are probably questions that DFI would need to answer. I'm thinking that covers really just generally. I think maybe the questions coming in terms of the A6 and the perception that there would be sections of that brought forward, is we've been asked, was Maboy holding up that? And I think that's really, we envisage that the Maboy project will go ahead of that. But the question comes up, if it didn't, what would happen? So it's a really kind of hypothetical question, would we hold up? So there is possibility of clearing that corridor, but that is not part of the integrated strategy.
Okay, Councillor Harkin, are you content enough to go to NI Water now for response?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate that, Claire. And I think we're going to need to see more of the actual proposal, because it's a number of people's understanding who've been very active around Maboy that there is, and this is what people are looking at, that people think that, and campaigners think it looks like the area where waste will be removed from is the area where the road is. Now, that's what we're trying to get clarification on. And I think what you're saying is that's not necessarily the case, but that'll have to, that's what people are seeking clarity on.
Through the chair, if Richard could come in on that.
Yeah, just to again reinforce what Claire said, it is an integrated site approach, and it's absolutely the case that we're looking across the whole site and not prioritising one area or another. And obviously what we'll want to do is ensure that we're dealing with the highest risk and ensure that that's remediated. So again, just to provide a reassurance in that. You did have another question about the money spent to date, and Claire has outlined the extensive monitoring and investigative work that has been done, and certainly from other sites of this type in other areas of we mentioned the site in Curtistown, but certainly the advice was to get as much information as possible at this point, so that we would be able to set up the remediation strategy in as well informed way as possible. So that's why an amount of money has been spent on the site, and also what I would also just say that it signals the commitment that we have to the remediation of the site, that money has been spent to date and has been found again, even in terms of the challenging budgets of this particular year. So again, just want to provide reassurance on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll ask Alison to come on to address your questions regarding NI Water.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the emerging toxins and what all we do currently monitor for, I suppose I did note some of the PFAS products there that they're not regulatory requirements, and they would be emerging parameters of concern, and those link through to the recast of the Drinking Water Directive and what they have classed as new and emerging parameters of concern that would be monitored in the member states. So that's why we've undertaken to look at those sort of parameters. So we're building up a data set on those, and we also undertake sort of others emerging parameters of concern that are linked through the Drinking Water Directive recast. So we're building up a data set on those too. In relation to plastics and microplastics, we don't undertake currently any analysis for those in drinking water, either in the raw or the treated. There aren't really analytical techniques at this point in time which are standardized across the industry, which is why we're doing that, but we're very involved in research within that area, keeping abreast of any research and analytical techniques that are there and that might be potentially used in the future, so that we have that resource when it's required and when it's needed. We also talked sort of through the presentations as well there, and I know we talked about it at the Carmody site too, about the qualitative scan that we undertake for our raw and treated water. And that's a GCMS time of flight, which is looking really for all of the parameters all of the time, in a sense. So it does a broad sweep across those, and we're looking for, it's not quantitative, we don't know the actual concentrations of them, but we look at the peaks and the peak heights and the potential for parameters to be there. So anything within that, if anything did show or indicate something of concern or a level of potential concern, that's where we would look to undertake some quantitative analysis for that parameter. And then that would be our data set to go forward to assess that risk. So we risk assessed based on that qualitative scan, and anything that would be shown within that required further analysis, then we would undertake that. And we would undertake that process going forward as well. You did mention there about sort of what life in the river and plant life, fish life, and how that's monitored and measured. And that's not under NI Water's responsibility. The monitoring of that within the river would fall to NIA and the water management team. So if there was questions in relation to that, those should be referred to NIA. And I think those were all the questions, unless there was anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, and thanks, Alison, as well. And look, points noted there about plastics. I mean, that is concerning, and that is something obviously that is, if it's across the industry, that's important because I think that's something that will hopefully be done going forward. And I appreciate that it's another body that we'll have to follow up with about plant life or life in the river. Thank you.
Go ahead, Claire.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, as part of the monitoring programme that we're running on the NIA side that Alison referred to, that there is biological monitoring as well. It's part of the whole extensive environmental monitoring programme, and that looks at what we call macro vertebrae on the river, and those are small insect type that look at the real longer term condition of the river. So we have a report on that published on our website as well that I can certainly send the link through that may be of interest. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Norris.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me in, and thank you, Claire and Alison, for the presentations. They're very, very informative. And I'd like to thank for the visit on Friday as well, because it was excellent. Each of the councillors went, got a great insight on how your drinking water is, how good quality it is. I have just a couple of wee questions. As you know, I'm a resident of the area, more so, and also a councillor. There's a lot of emotion, obviously, with residents, because we're living beside the biggest illegal dump in Europe, and a lot of people are worried all the time, and the information today will help with that, but going forward, so the wee question would be around the risk assessment. So I know you have done a quantitative risk assessment, but so this sort of ties into Alison as well. So we have what would be the main indicator if the waste started to leach into the river, and what would be your control measures for that consequence if it does start to leach in? And if that happened and the Carmody plant will shut down at that point, they stop the drinking water from going out, will our two sites have enough water to supply the whole area for the period of time that that would happen. Also, another part of the risk assessment would be, have you looked at when we do start to remediate the product out, the waste out, the transport of that waste and where that waste will be going and the risk associated with that? Thank you.
Thanks, through the chair. Thank you. There's probably a real overlap there in terms of the indicators. So I'll maybe make a start, and then Alison can maybe come in as well. So I think that the main one is the 24/7 monitoring that Northern Water have with ammonia, and ammonia being a proxy indicator, and that is what would cause the works. But I'm conscious that maybe I'm delving into Northern Water territory in terms of covering that. The second question there, in terms of removing the waste and the risks and how that would impact residents. Again, I think that feeds back into the detail around the options appraisal process, because removal of all the waste was an option that has been assessed through that whole process, and there's a real detail. There's 46 criteria across all those 10 zones, across all different options, and again, I don't know if I said it maybe a couple of times now, but we'd really welcome the opportunity to have a workshop to work through the detail of that, so we can really get a real good understanding of how that, because I can understand where the questions come from, and I don't think I can give it justice in explaining it in this forum. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire, and maybe asked Alison to comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Claire noted there, in relation to our works will shut down, or abstraction will shut down automatically on alarm for ammonia, and ammonia would be one of the most motile parameters that would be coming from the site if there was a potential risk and a breach there from the site. In addition to that, I suppose we have a good relationship with them, with the Maboy remediation team and NIA, and that we would be notified if there was anything that they were detecting, any risks that they'd picked up or any elevated parameters that would cause any concern. And then we would proactively shut the works down and the abstraction at that point. And yes, our contingency planning is there in place for the medium to long term in relation to removing Carmody water treatment works from supply if that was required, and to facilitate the supply for the area from the other two works where we can bring the water in. And that has been tested and verified that that system is fully operational and available to use at any time.
Go ahead, Councillor Norris.
Thank you so much. One more point, just something that Councillor Duffy said. In my view, I don't see it that if there isn't a permanent secretary or a minister in place, the sort of sanction this. I think it's a government issue now at this point, that the money should be made available and this remediation just go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Norris. And Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. I'm full enough. Can I just say first, before I do, can I thank Claire and Alison for the presentations today, and can I also thank Alison and her team who gave us the tour of the Carmody water treatment works, Sean and Francis, because it was a worthwhile visit. It was very, very educational. I am very far removed from being a scientist, but they managed to simplify it for the layman like myself, and I would imagine others as well. When it comes to science, I usually leave that to my colleague beside me here, Councillor Norris, who is much better informed in relation to these matters. However, and it's the point I wanted to make, Claire, if all things were equal, and it's not on this is not unrelated to what Councillor Norris has just referred to, and what Councillor Duffy had also asked, because the general public, by and large, will have this concern, and that is how long will all of this take, and ultimately how much will all of this cost? And there have been figures bandied about for some considerable time, and I accept that nobody holds a crystal ball. But if all things were equal, we had people in place, just like they do in County Kildare, if we had people in place who could make these decisions right now, today, and your programme of works and remediations were carrying on as you expect them to do, how long would one reasonably expect a project of this size and complexity to take, bearing in mind the evidence that's in front of us from other places, like Kildare? I believe there's other examples in County Cork as well. And it's probably a bit much for me to ask you how much you think all of that would cost, but will we bear in mind already the costs which have gone into taking it as far as it has taken? Because those are very real thoughts and very real concerns. I hope I'm not being unfair in asking you that question, but it's a question that I get asked quite often, and if anybody has that answer, I would very much like to hear it.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you. Thanks for the questions. Yeah, in terms of the timeline, you know, as you've outlined, there's this process and there are decisions to be made in affordability and those aspects which are complex and challenging. You know, we're not shying away from that. In terms of the project, the actual remediation works, we envisage that once they get started, you're talking 3 to 5 years, and that's similar to what Kildare County Council have encountered as well. In terms of the cost, the cost is, you know, we're well developed and developing the business case to be submitted, and costs being part of that. Now, again, you know, cost is something that we considered, you know, the potential question. It is something that we had considered. And again, we don't wish to be unhelpful, and we are doing our utmost to be open and transparent. But as it stands, because of the Crown, I maybe read out actually, because this is what our lawyers provide us in terms of the cost, and rather than try and muddle through it, I'll just bear with me and I will read it out to you. So the Crown Court has accepted guilty pleas from defendants further to charges under the Waste Management Contaminated Land Order. However, there's still a significant level of dispute between the prosecution case and the arguments advanced by operators. Given that the criminal proceedings remain live, we've been advised not to disclose the estimated costs of remediation. And we are committed to being as open and transparent with Council and other stakeholders as possible, but we must be cognizant of the legal advice received. And we do all need to make sure that the criminal proceedings are left unimpacted by our actions.
Look, just to say, I understand and I appreciate that, and I know we're at the Newton judgment stage in terms of that. I'm not going to go any further than that, Chair, but obviously I've read that element of the challenges that it faces. The sooner we know that, Claire, just to say, the better I'm sure it will be for the public to know as well. But I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you being as frank as you can be in relation to this. There are very real concerns, and I don't think you need to be told that. So look, I'll park it there for now. But you know, the time frame there gives us some indication of where we would be in 3 to 5 years, and hopefully, you know, maybe further forward than that. But as I've just said, nobody in this room, and certainly not you or your colleagues, have a crystal ball as to what the political future here might look like. So I was working on in the hope that we would have people who could make the decisions that would make your job easier as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Just to give Alison the opportunity, if she wants to make a comment or on the points you had raised. Are you happy enough with NIE's response there, Alison?
No, I'm happy with that. I don't think I have anything else to add on that one.
Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Donnelly now.
Good Chair. And I'd like to thank both deputations for their presentations and answers to the questions. And I'd like to thank NI Water for the tour of the treatment plant. It did, I'm no expert in it, but it did reassure me in some ways that there is a rigorous process there. Unfortunately, regards, and I know we were told that we can't talk about it, but it's my belief that the people who did face charges of this and were convicted are effectively patsies. They're at one end of it, and I believe that there's many other people responsible in this, and they will never face justice and will escape punishment. And I say that because we have a history here in this part of the world, structures, government structures and other structures of covering things up. And anybody that suggests that all we need or that gets Stormont up and running and it'll somehow, sort this mess out, look at the history of it. I would like to pay tribute to Joe Ferguson, who's no longer with us. Joe, and there was a series of podcasts on BBC Radio 4 called Buried that I believe that 1 million people downloaded, and anybody who hasn't listened to it should. This goes a lot deeper and wider than we're allowed to know about. I don't see any type of proper justice or people being held to account. And I believe there's a lot of our people that think the same. But I would like to know if there's anything that any of the groups here could say to reassure the public that it will be dealt with properly. And I'm not sure, I can't see any reason for not answering the question that people who were found guilty, is there any idea of when they will be sentenced? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Just on your last comments there, I did say that there can be no discussion regarding the sentencing, so I don't expect you'll get an answer to that. Yeah, I'm advised there's an update on the report in the committee papers. Claire, do you have anything further to add to that, or no? Alison?
No, nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, I'll move on then to Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question I asked at the last meeting, but officers weren't in a position to give me an answer that time. The question was, can council play a more active part in the remediation process?
Through you, Chair, members, you will recall from previous reports that officers had been scoping that, and certainly there is the potential that council could look at a range of ways of being more active in terms of the project, and certainly following on from today's presentations, then officers will be able to scope a paper for members to consider in relation to that, and certainly that will be a decision for elected members to consider in terms of all of the possible issues relating to council taking a more active role in the remediation. But certainly we will scope a paper and bring it back for members to consider. Thank you, Chair.
On the basis that would it be within council's remit to request that expressions of interest are obtained from the private sector?
Through you, Chair, certainly we can consider that in the paper that we bring back to members. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for missing the start of the first presentation, and but thanks to both for the presentation. I suppose my question follows on from Councillor Boyle. How long is it going to take? Well, you've asked that question. How much is it going to cost? you've asked that question. But following on from that, whatever course of remediation is finally arrived at is going to cost. Has there been any commitment from the Department of Finance that whatever it costs to carry out this remediation, the funds will be made available? Or is there a danger at the end of it that finance will determine that a proper remediation will not take place?
So there are decisions to be made around that, and there haven't been decisions because the business case needs to go forward for that decision on approval of the business case to happen. We are pushing forward in the preparation of that business case and envisage that being submitted to the Department of Finance at the end of this year, if not the beginning of 2024. So that's the position on that.
Just a follow up on that. I mean, my personal opinion is, as departments responsible, their first consideration should be the proper remediation of the situation. I hear business case, I begin to see value for money and all of that sort of stuff in there, rather than the protection of the citizens that are impacted by this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Members have no further councillors indicated to speak. So that brings us to the end of our presentations and questions. It just remains for me to thank both presentation teams today, to Claire, Jonathan, Richard and Mark from NIEA, and to Alison from NI Water. Thanks again for presenting today, which is a fairly big issue in this area, and we have it as a standing item on our agenda. And I've no doubt that we'll probably, our paths will cross again sometime in the future. So just to thank you again and to wish you a safe journey home. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, it's just gone after 25 to 6, just passed. So we'll continue on with the rest of our substantial agenda. I will ask members to, because it is a substantial agenda, to please keep your comments or questions succinct and to the point. We have until 8 o'clock to complete the agenda unless members have to reconvene. So item 6 is chairperson's business. Nobody had approached me about chairperson's business. The only thing I have myself is just to acknowledge and thank Karen and our staff for organising the meeting yesterday in Castledare, which myself and Alderman Kerrigan and Alderman Hussey attended, regarding the recent flooding in Castledare area. We got the opportunity to meet with Rivers Agency and DFI Roads and NI Water to raise different issues there. So just to thank Karen for that and our team. Item 7, members, is matters arising from our previous month's meeting. I'll go through pages 47 to 56. Councillor Hart.
ER 135/23, regeneration of the burn. I was just wondering, has there been any update on that, and have you been in contact with the Woodland Trust, etc.? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The officers have made contact with Woodland Trust and are in the process of arranging to meet them. So we will report back to members as soon as we can on that.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Okay, Alderman Middleton.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to ER 13823 on dog filing, I've been inundated with calls and messages just in regards to the Faughan Valley Woodlands. I thank council officers for helping me with a separate but closely related issue on that. It's brought to my attention that there's no dog filing bins at all on the entirety of the vicinity of the woodlands. A lot of the residents that have contacted me, as well as myself, I'm really concerned there's going to be maybe a sort of environmental health hazard happening if there's no bins, because whilst a lot of dog walkers are responsible, not all dog walkers are responsible. I'm just wondering if maybe we could liaise with the Woodland Trust on that, please. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, members, certainly it's my understanding that it's something that, we had suggested to Woodland Trust, and indeed, I suppose the wider Faughan Woodlands includes some NIA property as well, which I do know have some bins in and around some of their forest sites. We can make contact again, but again, if in order to actually for us to actively provide and collect from dog bins, we would need an arrangement with them. But happy to follow that up on behalf of the committee.
Okay, no other member indicated, so that takes us then to item 8, which is street naming and property numbering. Proposed by Councillor Boyle, seconded by Councillor McGinley. Is there any comment? No? Sorry, Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
Thank you. Just as officers will know, there's still outstanding questions that I haven't had answers to yet, via the cost. And I hope that will be forthcoming. I also know that in the neighbouring council, they were able to gain the information as to how many applications were requested by resident, how many were requested by councillor. So that not names, just resident or councillor, and could I ask that that information would be made available to council as well? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, your comments been noted, Alderman Hussey. I've Alderman Kerrigan indicated online. I might have missed you earlier.
You're all right, Chair. I was just going to concur with your remarks in regards to the flooding meeting there on Monday, so just concurring with them, but I'm grand, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, duly noted. Members, item 9 is removal of the bus shelter at Dramala, Strabane. Alderman Middleton.
I have no objections to that. I just want to talk about bus shelters, so I can wait maybe a wee minute if that's okay.
I just have another councillor indicated here who I presume wants to talk directly to it. It's Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that that's been taken on board in the residents. I actually conducted a survey. I went around all the doors, and I know Fountain Street Community Association as well has asked for it, and Councillor Barr has also been involved, so delighted that that's been taken forward. Thank you.
Are you content to propose that, Councillor Hart? Yeah.
Second.
I have another few indicated speakers here first. Councillor Barr. Jason Barr was first.
Just to come on a second up, Chair, but just out of respect to Councillor Raymond Barr, since he was actually dealt with the issue along with Councillor Hart, I'm happy enough for Councillor Raymond Barr to second it.
Okay, Raymond Barr, wants to speak on it?
Just briefly, it's an issue that was causing a bit of concern to residents of Drumnalla. I was asked by Graham McCormick to get a letter from the residents to confirm that they wanted to be moved, and we did that. So I'll be glad to see it action. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. And just for the minute clerk, that Councillor Raymond Barr seconded that. Councillor Harkin, you indicated come in. Is that a general query on bus shelters or specific to this issue? Go ahead then. In that case, I'll bring in Alderman Middleton first.
Thank you, Chair. Our party spoke to a lot of constituents, or has been contacted by a lot of constituents in the Donaghadee area. There's no bus shelter at all. We're coming into very rough weather, cold, wet. It's really dark there. There's not a lot of street lights.
We have a spare one.
You could pass it over that direction, that would be great. So the request for the bus shelter was approved, but we were told then there was no resources. I'm just conscious I wasn't part of the rates process. I wasn't elected then, and I was hopeful that maybe this could possibly be looked at, that maybe we could find some funding. There is a lot of children and young people that are just standing out, getting soaked and freezing. And just on the same point, I haven't spoken to any rural dweller this past year who feels like they're getting an equal share or a fair share for the rates that they're paying. And I think this in particular for Donaghadee would go a long way, when helping out on that. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, certainly I can ask the officers to look into that. We do have a very, very limited budget every year for bus shelters, members, as you are aware of, and the demand really does massively outweigh what the resources that members have set aside to deal with that. But certainly I can try and find out from the officers, where it is on the list or whatever, and come back to you in relation to that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm glad that the residents of Drumralla have been heard and that the bus shelter will be taken away. We've been working with people in Pine Trees, and they have requested to council for a bus shelter. Similar problems, lots of young people waiting for buses to go to school, getting soaked. They were turned down by the council. We've now went to TransLink to try and see if TransLink can move forward some funding. So could we take the Drumralla bus shelter and put it in Pine Trees? I can give you an exact location, and that's a serious proposal.
Through you, Chair, certainly we will relocate the bus shelter to wherever is sort of, I suppose, next on the priority, but we can certainly look into that.
Those are Castle Coin. We'll move on then, members, to item 10, City Cemetery Extension, and Philip's going to take that one for us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, you'll be aware that we're undertaking some works to facilitating.
I'm content to second, Chair.
It's done, members.
Proposed Councillor John Boyle, seconded Councillor McGinley. Item 11, members, is the review of the Connections Policy Framework, and that's Karen.
Yeah, members, this is to advise members of the joint call for evidence published by the Department for Economy and the Utility Regulator on the review of the Connections Policy Framework for Northern Ireland, and to seek any comments that members have in relation to the response that was pulled together by officers. So members, the background is set out in your report, and indeed some of the key issues that were pulled from the consultation in relation to the consultation and the call for evidence. So officers have actually reviewed the documentation, and they have drafted a response on behalf of council, and certainly we are more than happy to take any comments that elected members have and feed them back to DFE. So I'm just rather than delaying the meeting here today, if members want to make us aware of any comments that they may have, we can feed that under the consultation response. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions, and our energy officer is online if anyone has a specific query.
Thanks, Karen. I've Councillor McGinley indicated here.
Cormaga, Chair, just on behalf of Sinn Féin, we're content to support the response that the officers have put together, and I think it's really important to note that within the responses, there's a recognition of the levels of deprivation and poverty in this area, the cost of living crisis, and the importance of making sure that there's renewable energy options that are available to people. So I was impressed whenever I read through the responses, so I have no questions, just more to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGinley. Members, items 12 to 25 are for information, but I'll just go through them in order. And I would ask members if they have any questions or comments, again, please keep them brief. So item 12 is building control applications. Item 13 is the update report on the booking system at Eglinton and Glendermot recycling centres. Alderman Hussey.
Just really where that is at the minute. So I had got a proposal that HSE goes out and looks at that site again, both sites. We're getting from Glendermot and Eglinton. Our party is being asked a lot about the two sites and the online booking. And for Eglinton, more so that it's closed on a Saturday. And a lot of residents are looking for it open on the Saturday and closed possibly on the Wednesday. Basically, most people work, you know, so I'm getting called every Saturday. Every Saturday I get a phone call to ask why the dump's closed, you know, so if that could be possible. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, members, we've got a recycling working group coming up very soon, and I do think it will be important for members to have that a space to be able to discuss some of these issues in relation to recycling centres. You are fully aware that the budget was massively cut last year in relation to this particular service. So therefore, we've had to actually rationalise the opening hours of most of the recycling centres, and certainly the way in which officers have tried to do that is in terms of geographical area. So obviously when Eglinton's closed, Strathfoyle is opening, and again I know that people have commented in terms of Glendermot as well, and the same in terms of that. So certainly the reason why the recycling centres have got to close on those days is because we literally do not have anyone to man them, because we do not have the staff now, because of the way in which we tried to rationalise the service in order to meet as much of the need as we possibly could. And I understand that that's frustrating, but certainly we have got a recycling members working group coming up, so we can members can work through with us. If we want to change that, it basically means that another centre will have to close on a Saturday. So, that's the way in which we will have to operate at the minute. And then again, subject to consideration at the rates estimates process about the potential for increasing the resources again in this particular service. But certainly members, happy to go through that in a lot more detail because again, it's not just a matter of looking at one site, we have to look at all of them at the same time, and then we can work through with members if you want to change a decision in one site, how do we actually do that and what impact that would have on another site. So more than happy to work through all of the possible options, and certainly happy to take members' comments on board. In terms of the Health and Safety Executive, my understanding is that the team have been in contact with the Health and Safety Executive. I think that they are due to visit recycling centres. They visited a few of them so far. Connor is on leave this week, so he probably would have been able to answer the question in more detail, but we can find that out and an update in terms of the health and safety visits to the premises, specifically in relation to traffic management. But certainly, the report outlines that the reasons why we've had to have the booking systems is because of direct feedback from the Health and Safety Executive in relation to traffic management and safety of people on the site. And therefore, it's difficult to be able to override that, but certainly we can look into it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Norris, you want to back in briefly?
Yeah. So I'm not on that group, I don't believe. So will that be open to all councillors to come to it?
I'll speak to Connor. I think we have had nominations from members, but I can try and find out who is nominated from your party, and we can engage with you from that, and happy to take on your comments under the group, absolutely.
Councillor Deeney.
It's just to say that we understand there are traffic management issues at both of those centres. And although the booking system isn't ideal, the ratepayers expect these facilities to be open and have access to recycling services. I actually didn't know that if one, that you're trying to plan out between, say, Strathfoyle and Eglinton, so that's good to know. But if we were to move this booking system, it would mean the closure of the services, and this is the last thing everybody wants. So with that in mind, we'd be supportive of the current system staying, but in the view that it would just be continually reviewed and traffic management to be continually looked at. So thank you.
Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. And it's an issue that you may be aware of yourself, and it's relative to the skip lorry at Spelman, where the criteria seems to have been changed as to acceptability of particular types of waste. A notice has appeared, household waste only, at that site. I've received some calls about it, and I'm sure other local representatives have received that as well. I think it's important the council realise that this provision was to replace a functioning skip site outside the village of Kiln. It's household waste only. How do we define household waste? Because the previous site, which was replaced by the lorry, was available to businesses, reference cardboard, etc. And there's a suggestion that that has changed. I don't know. The only rationale I can understand is that if there was a capacity issue with the lorry, and I'm certainly not aware that there has ever been a capacity issue with the lorry. So why has this been changed? Without notification, particularly to elected representatives at least. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, through you, Chair, members, certainly as members will be aware, there are restrictions in terms of what we can actually take into our recycling centres. Councils don't collect commercial waste. So businesses, unless they're acting on behalf of a resident while they're in their house doing work, etc. So for example, if they're doing some renovation or gardening or whatever, then the business can bring waste to our sites. However, a business that's bringing their own commercial waste, they need to actually have a commercial waste collector. We do provide that as well, but that's at a cost as per the legislation, and therefore, it will very much depend on the circumstances. So basically, businesses can bring waste if they are acting on behalf of a resident while they're doing work on the resident's property, and or their garden or some renovations, etc. But businesses themselves have got to actually have their own commercial waste collections, which we can arrange through council, and we do provide that service to businesses, but we don't provide it it's a service that businesses will pay for. So we can bring, if it would be helpful, I can ask Conor to bring a more detailed report to members in relation to that next month, if that would be helpful.
Chair, I appreciate that clarification that somebody doing work on somebody's private property can and they bring the material to the skip lorry. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'll double check in terms of just if there's any other issues, because I wasn't aware specifically of this lorry, but certainly I'll explore that with the staff.
Okay, Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just following on from Alderman Hussey's point there, again, I do note your comments there, Karen, in regards to that, and two questions on it. In regards to the lorry at Spamount, and again, I've had similar conversations with residents there. They're taking brown bin waste, and they were refused to from their own dwelling house. They had cut grass, and there was too much grass. The brown bin was full, and they were looking to take and empty it, and at Spamount, and were refused it, and were sent on to Strathans Road. I do note that further on, and on the agenda. You know, we're looking about and maybe another enforcement officer there. You know, you have a potential there of additional fly tipping. It might well be the like of that sort of waste, but that's that's household waste as far as I would be concerned, or from a household property. It's not work. It's individuals went and a man was, now he did go on to Slahans Road, but you know how many won't. That's the difficulty, and just that's one element. And I just note on this report here, 4.1, it states there that these in regards to these are the only two sites that a booking system is in consideration of the health and safety requirements. Just wondered, is there still a booking system in regards to large vans or anything in that regard? Because I mean, or maybe has that now ended? I just can't remember, and just for clarification in my own head, there was a booking system for everyone's looking to bring in maybe a van and trailer or a vehicle and trailer into the centre, particularly Slahans Road. And I wonder, has that ended? I forgot to ask previously. Thank you very much, Chair.
Members, through you, I don't have that information here today. Members, if Connor was here, he would have probably been able to answer that off the top of his head, but I will find out and we will come back to members in relation to that. Thank you.
Karen? Excuse me.
Okay, members, moving on then. Our next item is item 14, as the update on the circular economy zero waste strategy. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the helpful update in the document. And could we also get an update on the development of the Think and Do tank as per the policies within the strategy to help drive forward the zero waste circular economy? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, happy to consider that and bring back a further report.
Item 15, members. Karen's going to come on this one on the defective blocks update report.
Yeah, just members, just for your information, the report here is an open business. However, the appendices that were attached in relation to the feedback from individuals contain personal information. So therefore that is restricted to confidential business. But I think it's just to note that following the awareness campaign, we had 10 submissions. 4 of them were from residents believing that they may have been affected with defective blocks, and the remainder were emails in relation to the wider campaign. So it's just from members' information.
Sir McGinley.
Good Chair, and thank you for that, Karen. And thanks for the report. Obviously, it is a massive issue. It's affecting more so in Donegal and in around Donegal at the minute. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's more here. Obviously, information is within confidential, but there has been responses there from academics, and I'm not going to pretend that I know I'm across all the detail of the science of defective blocks, because I'm not. But I'm wondering, is it possible that we could bring them, it doesn't have to be a full special council meeting, but to bring them in to give us that briefing, to give us a bit more information so that we're better informed as members?
Through you, Chair, we can certainly extend an invitation to present to committee. There's a few booked in for the next couple of months, so it might be early in the new year, but we can certainly try and to do that.
Alderman Hussey.
Well, sorry, I wasn't sure if you were looking at me or not there. Thank you, Chair. It's just, we're all aware that the issue of RAC has now raised its head. Does that impact, do we know, or will it impact on ourselves? And is that something that will have to be added into this whole scenario?
Through you, Chair, certainly members, in relation to that particular issue, the officers, and it does relate to buildings which I think are of a certain age, and our officers are looking at basically all of the council assets at the minute to consider whether there is any potential concerns, and we'll certainly update members as soon as that process has already started and the officers are working through it. So far, I'm not aware of any concerns, and we haven't been made aware of any, but certainly we will ensure that every one of our assets is considered in relation to this, and we'll update members accordingly as soon as possible.
Councillor Deeney.
Good Chair. Alderman Hussey just asked the question that I was going to ask there. But just to add, we all know that this is a huge issue across the island. And just to add to what Councillor McGinley has said, I just want to note that Padraig Delargy, MLA, has written to the Department of Education to raise concerns surrounding defective blocks in schools across the north. We have asked to get a list of schools which could potentially be impacted within the city. Schools and families need certainty. A full assessment must immediately be carried out by the Department of Education. And just a declaration of interest, I am an employee of the Department for Education.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, the defective blocks are a very, very serious issue, and it's my understanding that the Education Authority's been commissioned now to carry out a survey of all schools across the north, which includes schools in our district. I think we should ask the Education Authority to make that survey available to us as soon as possible. And that they need to do that urgently. So I'm obviously not on this committee, but if that is, if someone can propose that, or if it can be taken on board, I think we should be looking to the Education Authority immediately to get us that information, so that we can then take action if there are schools that have rack in them.
I'm happy to propose that, Councillor Harkin.
Okay, proposed by Councillor Deeney, seconded by Alderman Hussey. Item 16 then, proposed by Councillor Boyle, seconded.
17, it's there for information, Chair. I don't need it.
Councillor Duffy. Item 17 then. Sorry, Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
Thank you. Both myself and Alderman Kerrigan had concerns about the location of disabled parking bays in Castleberg. I know I've been contacted by DFI in regard to this, and I'm sure Councillor Kerrigan or Alderman Kerrigan has been contacted as well. Has there been any correspondence with the council on the issue of the location of the disabled parking bays in Castleberg Town Centre? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, members, it's my understanding that we did go back to DFI following the last committee, and they did agree to undertake a review of the locations. I haven't heard any further information since, but certainly it's my understanding that they're intending to consider the locations. I don't think that they'd quite realised that that was what was being asked of them. So certainly my understanding is they're doing that. I haven't heard anything back yet, but we will update members as soon as we can once they come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think yourself will understand that that needs to be all in tandem with the proposals reference levelling up, etc. in town centre. So I would hope that there would be sooner rather than later communication. Thank you.
Okay, item 17 is water flooding and sustainable drainage consultation. Item 18, flooding update for information. Councillor Norris.
Just very quickly, thank you, Chair. In that paper, they've said they're employing a consultant, to look at the land. Like, I was there the night of the flooding coming down the Ballygodden Road, and I know how harp on about it, but it was just all land water that night, and then it sort of escalated under the river. But just more so, it seems to be taking a long time, that this consultant is being employed, and the longer it does, the longer people are just, every time it rains, everybody lives in fear, so there's a worry there. So I'd just like to know how quick they can escalate the employment, Thank you.
Through you, Chair, we can certainly ask the question following on from the committee and ask that it's included in the next update report. Thank you.
Okay, members, item 19 is our standing Maboy update. I'm sure we've already exhausted that issue today. Item 20 is Newton Stewart Regeneration Framework update. I know that Councillor Devine wanted me just to pass on comments welcoming and look forward to the framework being presented in November. She also welcomed the proposals on formal communication mechanisms with the traders being established. But she had asked to, in the meantime, that we would write to the chair of the traders group, I think it's John Gallagher, to update them on the progress. Alderman Hussey.
Good Chair, just in 3.4 of the it says offer note the comments of members from the July 2023 E&R committee. It wasn't just comments. There was a proposal there that a forum would be established. Is there any progress on that? And it was to be the local elected representatives, but I've heard nothing. I don't know about yourself.
Yeah, I'll ask Tony to come in there to comment on that.
Okay, members, yeah, obviously take the point there in relation to the fact actually it was more than just comments first and foremost. So as we advised at the last meeting, we're currently in the final stages of the preparation of the document. We're currently giving consideration to the type of model or mechanism that might work best in terms of the town centre forum, and that's actively being considered. We have indicated that when we come to November that we will have I suppose, detail in terms of how that will be structured in terms of its composition, its role, its frequency, and that will form part of I suppose, a very important element of moving the adopted framework to the next stages. So it's very much work in progress this minute in time, but the details of which will accompany at our November meeting.
Thanks for that, Tony. Item 21 is for information. Item 22 is for information. Item 23 is for information and an update. Alderman Hussey.
I need advice from Philip on this one. I do have a question, but I'm one of the participants and recipients within this scheme. I do have questions that are relevant to the key issues that are named here. Can I ask them, or do I need to withdraw?
Trying to strike a balance here. Alderman Hussey, but obviously, as a potential recipient of the benefit in relation to the matter, this is, a decision which you should not participate in. You may wish to, even to facilitate this, and given that I don't think there are any other members from the party that are present that could ask the questions on your behalf, you may wish to ask the questions, receive answers as best we can in relation to those matters, so long as they're in relation to the scheme broadly, rather than individual matters. And we can try to provide you with the information of those, and having received that information, you may then wish to leave the chamber for the remainder of the item if that assists.
That's fair enough. I think I understand that, Philip. And if I step beyond it, just say stop. Through you, Chair, then, the key issues, particularly 3.2, contractors have commenced work in Castlereagh. And 3.3, there's liaison with property owners, etc. I don't know how far that has gone. I know where it hasn't gone to. I can categorically say that not all those who received notification of the scheme have been contacted. There's something in there about choosing your colours and all the rest of it. I'm aware of folk who haven't had that contact.
Okay, Chair, yeah. Obviously, the contractor and the detail, unfortunately, isn't in the report. The contractor has, in terms of all of the locations, particularly the larger locations, has broken them into phases in relation to, so in Castlereagh, it'll be delivered over 4 phases. So we've been keen to get the contractor out on site as quickly as possible. And really what they're doing is, you'll see they're already in the town at the minute, in and around the vicinity of the lower end of where Castlefin Road is and around there. there. So those properties were the first with which the members from my team have been engaging with in order to give the painkillers. We are now that they're on site, and you'll note that they've been on site since last week. They are now, we're now working through the detailing in terms of what their phase 2, 3 and 4 will be. And that's very active. And the members of the team have actually met this morning with them to identify basically the precise geographical areas, dates of when they're on board, on site, and then the direct engagement with the business. So that should happen, I would say, over the next week, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. That clarifies it, and I can speak to others who had brought it to my attention. Thank you.
Okay, and just to welcome the commencement of that project. It's good to see it eventually get off the ground. Members, our next item then is 24, Saban Public Realm Scheme. Councillor Barr, Jason Barr.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose it's a good way to see this brought back onto the agenda again. I'm just, obviously it doesn't come as a surprise to see that not one bullet point on there as I've got a positive outlook for Strabane Town under the current public realm that's there. So it just proves that it needs to be updated or done very, very soon. Item or point 2.7, it states that a casework was submitted, a business case was submitted in October 2022. And then after that, it would work with the department. Where is this, where currently is the business case at the minute? And when does it hope to be submitted? And when that is submitted, is it the case that needs the minister sign off, or can the permanent secretary sign that off?
Through you, Chair, members, the way in which the team have been trying to deal with this is given, I suppose, the challenges that we have faced so far in relation to the project, and certainly the disappointment of officers and indeed of members in terms of the project not passing through the casework committee when it was presented back in October 22. We have very much tried to work with the officials from the Department for Communities in a hand-and-glove basis in order to ensure that every single element of the business case and the revised business case, because certainly they had asked for an awful lot of the information to be updated. You'll see in the paper, again, some additional physical surveys, business surveys, etc., costs. So really, what we're trying to do is work through every single aspect of that with the officials and their economists in order to make sure that, you know, rather than it coming, we submit the business case, they say there's something else needed, they give it back to us, we give it to them. That just has not worked with this project at all. So really, I suppose that what I'm saying is we're working together to get to a stage where it can go to casework committee. My understanding is we're pretty close on that, and there is very, very active work by both the council officer team and indeed the departmental officials in terms of getting it to that stage. In terms of the approval mechanisms, given the level of funding that we're talking about, it will have to actually be submitted to DOF for approval. Again, we have been trying to ensure that the DOF economists are being engaged with by DFC, so that we're not again back to asking us more questions in relation to this. And then my understanding is that the project was identified as high priority for the Department of Communities, and indeed the previous minister had indicated that they were very supportive of the project. Actually approving the business case, I just don't know until we actually get to the stage where it's in there and they can actually say where we're going to go on it. You know, I know certainly they are considering you know, all possible options in terms of being able to get it approved and indeed started as quickly as possible, because I think with this project we have actually taken it to a stage where once the business case gets through that approval process and they give us the go ahead on the funding, we can just go straight out to appoint a contractor. We don't need to do any more detailed design or anything like that on this. And we've been really pressing on that to departmental officials, and they fully get it as well. So certainly, I'd love to be a bit more specific on actual dates, but we are actively working with them, and we will try and get it to the casework committee as quickly as we possibly can, and then hopefully then it can start on the ground following on from that. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the questions that I had, you've just answered, but I read the report and the comments from the traders as well. And, you know, the people of Strabane town are crying out for this to be done. The town centre is in a bad state of repair. I've had constituents come to me with elderly parents have fallen on some of the pavements. So I think it's imperative that this scheme is pushed forward. And I'm sure my colleagues, Jason Barr and Raymond Barr, would also agree with that. So whatever the council can do to get it done as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to note those comments. And I think really that's a reason why we felt it was important to include the comments of the traders within the report today, so that the members, rather than having to read through the business case, are fully aware of some of the comments that the traders have made. You know, and I think it really just pushes home point of how needed the scheme is, and certainly we are doing everything we can to move it forward as quickly as possible, and we'll continue to do so.
Alderman Hussey.
Just briefly following up from Councillor Hart and Councillor Imbar, the three of us were at a meeting of the Neighbourhood Renewal Local Growth Partnership this morning in Strabane, and received quite a full update from the chair. I understood that all parties were entitled to be at that, so some weren't. That's up to them. But there was certainly a great deal of enthusiasm, because the public realm scheme falls in with the overall city deal concept, and I think that's very important that it is there. And indeed, we were assured that the overall city deal scheme for Strabane was ahead of the pack, and that is to be welcomed. The one thing that was common across the entire meeting, a well-attended meeting from right across the community in Strabane, the one thing was expectation vis-a-vis delivery, and the concern that people's expectations can be raised and they can be let down. So it is extremely important that if these things are going to happen, you know, if we say they're going to happen, that they do happen, that they happen in a timely fashion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. No other indicated speakers there. I had seen Councillor Kerrigan had indicated, but I'm suspecting.
You're grand, Chair. Never worry. You're grand.
No problem. I suspect it was probably on the COVID small settlements grant.
Aye, but you're top. As I say, I'll send a wee email to Tony. You're 100%, Chair.
No problem. We'll record you as having welcomed it as well. Item 25 is for information is the unadopted roads update, and Alderman Hussey.
Just to welcome this development, as Karen herself knows, within the unadopted roads scenario, this is one thing that has been of concern, was the ability of council to carry out some of its responsibilities when a road is not actually adopted. We had reached a compromise where once the adoption application was in, but this goes beyond that and will be extremely welcome for many, many folk in new developments throughout the entire city and district. So thanks for that, Karen. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Barr. Jason Barr.
Thank you, Chair. This is not as to do with unadopted roads, but maybe we'll be off the topic on it. If officers they might know, they might not know. But and if we can get some maybe clarification on this. I've been contacted by residents who live in streets that's not adopted, but are wondering how gas is able to go into a new housing estate. Now, it's not a fully, these houses are not going to be fully gassed, but there's already gas been put into some houses. But there's a couple of housing estates in Strabane that aren't adopted. But their SGN says that no, because the state's not adopted, that they can't go on to it. Do you know of any policy or framework around that at all that would help?
Yeah, through you, Chair, that's not something we've ever looked into. But certainly we could contact SGN and ask them for an update that we can bring to committee.
Councillor Norris.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me up. Just to echo Alderman Hussey, this is fantastic actually for sites, but how does the site make itself aware? Or do you know, how does the site make itself aware? I know of at least a couple of sites in my area. So, and they're bringing their bunds down like a couple of 100 yards, some of them maybe 400 or 500 yards. And is the council aware of them sites, or do we need to make them aware?
Through you, Chair, certainly members, if there's any that you're aware of, let us know. My understanding is that the team have been working through everywhere that we know that people have to bring their bins out. Obviously, we will have to undertake a dynamic risk assessment to consider are there any issues, because certainly we can't bring vehicles in where there are other barriers that would cause danger to either residents or the staff, etc. But it's my understanding that following on from this change, the team have been going through and assessing everywhere that we're aware of that aren't yet adopted, and then we can start to change our processes accordingly. But certainly if any member is concerned about anyone, contact Conor and we can actually ensure that we look into it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, and I've Councillor Riley online, but he's just indicated that his question's been answered, so no need for him to come in. Members, that brings us to our items, the end of our items for information. So can I propose now that we have a comfort break for 10 minutes and we'll reconvene then. Just before we do, could I have a proposer and seconder just to go on to confidential? Councillor Jason Barr and Councillor John Boy.